A white inmate never imagined that the first time he stepped into the prison yard, he would accidentally bump into a black inmate. Every prisoner nearby immediately turned to watch. James knew that if he showed even a hint of weakness, he would become everyone's target. Without thinking twice, he threw a hard punch. Within seconds, several inmates rushed him and beat him badly. Even so, his fearless reaction caught the attention of the leader of the white prison gang. James' calm but unbreakable determination would eventually transform him into one of the most dangerous men in the prison. The prison was controlled by three powerful gangs: the white gang, the Mexican gang, and the black gang. They were constantly fighting for control. Almost every inmate carried a homemade weapon, and violent clashes between rival gangs were an everyday reality. Surviving without the protection of a gang was nearly impossible. After James was released from solitary confinement, a white gang member named Frank approached him and took him to the local gang leader, a man everyone called Bottle. Joining the gang wasn't easy. Bottle had already investigated James's entire background. Before prison, James had been a highly successful Wall Street businessman. He had wealth, a beautiful wife, a young son, and what seemed like the perfect life. Then one terrible mistake destroyed everything. After leaving a party, James drove home while intoxicated. His car crashed, killing his friend instantly. He was convicted and sent to prison, losing everything he had built. Bottle knew James desperately needed the gang's protection. But in this prison, protection always came with a price. If James wanted to survive the remaining 16 months of his sentence, he would have to obey every order without question. His first assignment was to smuggle contraband inside the prison. During the day, he received the package. That night, despite the humiliation and pain, he concealed it inside his body. The next morning, he went to the restroom, retrieved the package, and quietly handed it to Frank. His first mission was complete. James believed he had finally earned the gang's trust. He was wrong. The real test was still waiting. A few days later, Bottle called him in again. This time, the order left James speechless. He had to kill a gang traitor. Bottle made it clear that this would be his initiation. If James refused, he wouldn't just lose the gang's protection. His wife and son's safety could also be at risk. James realized this wasn't simply an order. It was a threat. If he ever wanted to leave prison alive and see his family again, he would have to stain his hands with blood. He tried to steady himself, but the moment he gripped the knife, his hands began to shake. As soon as the target stepped out of his cell, another gang member grabbed him from behind and dragged him inside. James clenched his jaw and delivered the first stab. For a brief moment, he froze. Then he kept attacking until the man stopped moving. When it was over, James quietly walked out without saying a word. There was no emotion on his face. It was as if he had crossed a line he could never return from. From that day forward, James was no longer an ordinary man. He had become a dangerous prison gangster. To reward his loyalty, the gang leader gave him a new tattoo. In prison, tattoos weren't decorations. They represented power, loyalty, and rank. The more tattoos an inmate earned, the greater his status. As time passed, James became one of the white gang's most trusted members. One day, the entire prison prepared for a massive gang war. The white and Mexican gangs formed an alliance to attack the black gang. Everyone pulled out homemade weapons. Before the fight began, the gang leader gave one final warning. Attack together. Just don't let the security cameras catch you committing a crime alone. Moments later, the signal was given. The prison exploded into chaos. Screams echoed through the yard as inmates fought with knives and homemade weapons. During the violence, James noticed another gang member about to be attacked from behind. Without hesitation, he charged forward and slammed into the attacker, knocking him to the ground. Seconds later, correctional officers rushed in with weapons. The sound of gunfire echoed across the yard, and every inmate immediately dropped to the ground. When James looked up, his heart sank. He was standing directly in front of a security camera. Everything he had done had been recorded. His worst fear became reality. Not long afterward, James was put on trial again. The prison surveillance footage clearly showed him fatally stabbing another inmate during the gang fight. As a result, 15 more years were added to his sentence. When his wife came to visit, she was horrified. She could hardly recognize the man who had once been a loving husband and responsible father.